The quantum elevator hummed its discordant tune as it carried Kai Tremaine toward what he privately called his doom by paperwork. 23 floors of crystalline spires stretched above New Valeria's royal palace, each one housing enough digital archives to make a librarian weep with joy or terror. He hadn't decided which yet. Floor 17, Historical Archives Division, announced the elevator's AI in a voice that somehow managed to sound both regal and bored. "Please mind the gap between reality and recorded history." Kai snorted. Even the palace elevators had attitude. He adjusted his civilian identification badge, a modest thing compared to the holographic rank insignia worn by the military personnel he'd passed in the lobby, and stepped into a corridor that looked like it had been carved from a single massive crystal. Light refracted through the walls in patterns that hurt his eyes if he stared too long. "Mr. Tremaine," a floating servobot approached, its chrome surface reflecting the prismatic light show. "I am Archivist 7, your assigned research assistant. I trust your journey from Earth Central was tolerable." "Well, nobody tried to vaporize me, so I'm calling it a win." Kai followed the bot down the gleaming hallway. "Though I did spend 3 days in hyperspace, eating nothing but synthesized protein cubes that claimed to be beef-flavored. I'm pretty sure beef never tasted like disappointment and regret." "An unfortunate consequence of faster-than-light travel," Archivist 7 replied with what might have been digital sympathy. "The royal kitchens, however, maintain an extensive database of Earth cuisine. Perhaps you would find our replicated hamburgers more palatable." Replicated hamburgers on an alien world. My mother always said I'd go places. Kai paused as they passed a massive viewing portal. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see the sprawling city below, towers that twisted impossibly upward, connected by bridges of pure energy that pulsed with commuter traffic. Though I don't think this is what she had in mind. The archive chamber itself defied every expectation Kai had formed during his 3-week journey. Instead of dusty shelves or sterile databanks, he found himself in a vast spherical room where holographic records floated like luminous butterflies. Thousands of them drifted in slow orbits around a central platform, each one containing compressed terabytes of information. "The complete military archives of the Korath campaign," Archivist 7 explained, extending a manipulator arm to guide one of the floating records toward them. 7 years of conflict, cataloged down to individual munitions expenditures. Your task is to cross-reference human contractor involvement with supply chain discrepancies. Sounds thrilling. Nothing I love more than spending my days hunting for missing widgets in a war zone's paperwork. Kai activated his portable workstation, and the holographic interface materialized around him like a digital cocoon. "Though I have to ask, why bring in a human archivist for this? Surely your people have perfectly capable bean counters." The Queen's advisors felt that human perspective might reveal patterns invisible to our analysts. The servobot replied with careful diplomacy. "Cultural blind spots, as it were." Kai nodded absently, already absorbed in the first data stream. Numbers cascaded past his vision: weapons shipments, personnel transfers, casualty reports. But something nagged at him, a familiar sensation from his years cataloging corporate mergers back on Earth. When humans were involved in large-scale operations, there were always inconsistencies, always little gaps where profits got hidden or responsibilities got shuffled. Hours passed in the peculiar timeless bubble that enveloped dedicated researchers. Kai barely noticed when Archivist 7 departed for routine maintenance, or when the artificial lighting shifted to match the planet's sunset cycle. He was deep in the data flows, following digital breadcrumbs through a labyrinth of procurement records and battle reports. It was past midnight when he first glimpsed Queen Lyrelei. She appeared in the archive's entrance like a figure from an old Earth fairy tale, tall and graceful with silver hair that seemed to catch and hold the chamber's ethereal light. Her ears rose to elegant points, the only feature that marked her as non-human. though the jagged scar running from temple to jaw spoke of experiences no fairy tale queen would recognize. She moved with the controlled precision of someone who had learned to navigate the world despite persistent pain. "Your Majesty." Kai stood quickly, nearly tripping over his workstation's power coupling. "I wasn't expecting. I hope I'm not disturbing." "Mr. Tremaine." Her voice carried an accent he couldn't place, musical but edged with something harder. "I apologize for the intrusion. I often find myself unable to sleep, and these archives have become something of a refuge." "No apology necessary. Though I have to warn you, if you're looking for light reading, military procurement records probably aren't your best bet." He gestured at the floating holograms around them. "Unless you're really into the thrilling world of supply chain logistics." Something shifted in her violet eyes, surprise perhaps or amusement. "Most humans I encounter are more formal in their interactions with royalty. Well, most archivists I know don't get invited to alien palaces. I figure we're both operating outside our normal parameters here." Kai realized he was still standing awkwardly and settled back into his chair. "Besides, excessive formality makes me break out in hives, very unprofessional looking." A smile ghosted across her features before disappearing behind the mask of royal composure. "Indeed. Tell me, have you found anything interesting in your research?" Kai hesitated. The discrepancies he'd begun to notice were troubling but hardly conclusive. "Well, there are some unusual patterns in the contractor data. Nothing concrete yet, but..." He shrugged. "Let's just say if this were a corporate audit back home, I'd be asking some pointed questions about where certain funds ended up." The Queen's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "The Korath campaign was costly in many ways. Perhaps it is better to let old wounds heal rather than probe them further." "Maybe, though in my experience, infected wounds don't heal just because you stop looking at them." The words slipped out before Kai could stop them, and he immediately regretted the medical metaphor. The Queen's scar seemed to pulse in the chamber's shifting light, but instead of offense, he saw something else in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or kinship. "A wise observation, Mr. Tremaine. Perhaps tomorrow you might share more of your findings with my advisors." She moved toward the exit, then paused. "And Mr. Tremaine, please continue being yourself. Excessive formality gives me headaches." After she left, Kai sat alone among the floating records, wondering why a casual conversation with an alien queen had felt more natural than most of his interactions with his own species. Above him, the archived battles of the Korath campaign drifted in their eternal dance, keeping their secrets locked in quantum encryption. He had no way of knowing that some secrets were about to unlock themselves. 3 days of cross-referencing data had left Kai with a headache that felt suspiciously like his brain was trying to escape through his ears. The royal archives had yielded their secrets reluctantly, like a bureaucrat being asked to work overtime without compensation. But what he'd found made his stomach churn in ways that had nothing to do with the replicated hamburgers. "Archivist 7, remind me again why I thought forensic accounting would be a relaxing career change." Kai rubbed his temples as another cascade of financial records materialized around his workstation. "I believe your exact words were, 'How hard can it be to count other people's money?'" The servobot's optical sensors flickered in what Kai had learned to interpret as digital amusement. "Though I should note that my humor subroutines may be malfunctioning." "Your humor subroutines are fine. It's reality that's broken." Kai gestured at the holographic display showing weapons shipment records. "Look at this. The human consortium delivered 40,000 plasma rifles to Sector 7 just 3 days before the Korath siege. But according to the battle reports, Sector 7 fell in less than 6 hours. What happened to all those weapons? Perhaps they were destroyed in the bombardment. 40,000 military-grade plasma rifles. Those things are built to survive nuclear winter and still have enough charge to melt a tank. They don't just disappear because someone drops a bomb on them." Kai pulled up another data stream. And here's the really fun part. 3 days after Sector 7 fell, someone placed an order for 40,000 replacement rifles. Same specifications, same manufacturer, same shipping route. The servobot's manipulator arms twitched in what might have been electronic concern. That does seem, statistically, improbable. About as improbable as finding a unicorn in a taxi cab. Kai stood and began pacing, a habit that had annoyed his colleagues back on Earth but helped him think. Either we're looking at the most incompetent military logistics operation in galactic history, or someone's been running a very profitable shell game with weapons shipments. Mr. Tremaine, Archivist 7 voice carried a note of urgency that Kai had never heard before. You have been summoned to present your preliminary findings to the Royal Council, immediately. Kai's stomach dropped. Define immediately in this context. Are we talking, finish your coffee first, immediately, or drop everything and run immediately? The latter, I'm afraid. The Queen specifically requested your presence in the crystal chamber within the next 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Kai looked down at his wrinkled civilian clothes and unshaven face. I look like I've been wrestling with a data hurricane, which, to be fair, I have been. Perhaps you could mention that in your presentation. Truthfulness is highly valued in royal court proceedings. Great. Nothing says professional competence like admitting you've been living on synthesized coffee and paranoia for 3 days straight. Kai grabbed his portable workstation and the crystal containing his compiled findings. If this goes badly, make sure my obituary mentions that I died doing what I loved, making other people uncomfortable with inconvenient questions. The crystal chamber earned its name honestly. Every surface gleamed with faceted walls that split and reflected light into patterns that made Kai's data-strained eyes water. Queen Lyrale sat on a throne that appeared to have been carved from a single massive gemstone, surrounded by advisors whose expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Your Majesty, esteemed council members. Kai approached the raised platform, trying not to trip over the ceremonial runner that seemed designed specifically to catch unwary human feet. I hope you'll forgive my appearance. I've been spending quality time with some very antisocial financial records. A ripple of something, amusement, confusion, passed through the assembled advisors. Queen Lyrale's violet eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Mr. Tremaine, please share your findings, she said, her voice carrying the formal cadence of royal protocol. Kai activated his portable display, and holographic charts materialized in the air above the council chamber. Well, the good news is that your military procurement system is very thorough. The bad news is that it's been thoroughly exploited by someone with a talent for creative bookkeeping. He gestured to the first chart, showing weapons shipment routes overlaid with battle casualties. During the Korath campaign, there's a consistent pattern of supply deliveries arriving just before major defeats. Not suspicious by itself, wars are chaotic, timing is everything, people make mistakes. But when you cross-reference the delivery schedules with casualty reports and subsequent reorder patterns, the charts shifted, revealing a web of connections that painted a picture no one in the chamber wanted to see. Someone's been playing a very sophisticated game. Deliver weapons to positions that are about to be overrun, let the enemy capture or destroy them, then fulfill lucrative replacement contracts. Rinse, repeat profit. Kai paused, watching the advisors' faces. It's actually quite elegant from a purely financial perspective, morally reprehensible but elegant. You're suggesting deliberate sabotage. The Queen's voice remained controlled, but Kai caught the dangerous undertone. I'm suggesting that statistical analysis indicates a probability of coordinated manipulation that exceeds random chance by a factor of roughly. Kai checked his calculations. 17,000 to 1, which, in academic terms, means someone's been very naughty. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush diamonds. Then one of the advisors, A stern-faced woman with ceremonial rank insignia leaned forward. "These are serious allegations, human. Do you have proof of deliberate coordination?" Kai reached into his jacket for the data crystal containing his most damning evidence. As he approached the throne to present it formally, something extraordinary happened. The moment Queen Lyraleigh's fingers brushed his as she accepted the crystal, the world exploded into shared memory. Fire, smoke, the acrid smell of melted metal and something worse. Strong hands pulling her from rubble that had once been a command bunker. Gray eyes looking down at her through the chaos, calm and determined and utterly human. The recognition hit both of them simultaneously, a quantum entanglement of consciousness that left no room for doubt. Kai staggered backward, his mind reeling with memories that weren't his own, the weight of command, the desperation of a losing battle, the moment when death had seemed certain until... "You," Queen Lyraleigh whispered, her composure cracking for the first time since he'd arrived at the palace. "You were there, at Korath. You pulled me from the rubble." The throne room erupted in confused murmurs, but Kai barely heard them. His own memories were flooding back. The emergency medical deployment, the collapsing bunker, the alien woman with violet eyes who'd looked at him with such gratitude before losing consciousness. "Well," he said weakly, his usual humor failing him for once, "this is either a really amazing coincidence, or the universe has a seriously twisted sense of timing." The ancient biorecognition protocols embedded in the Queen's neural implants activated with a resonance that every person in the chamber could feel. The debt bond, older than written law, encoded in quantum frequencies that transcended species, blazed to life between them. And suddenly, a human archivist with rumpled clothes and a talent for asking inconvenient questions found himself legally equal to an alien queen, bound by laws that predated both their civilizations. The data crystal containing evidence of massive corporate conspiracy lay forgotten on the crystal floor, its secrets suddenly insignificant compared to the revelation that had just rewritten everything they thought they knew about duty, loyalty, and the price of survival. The debt bond's activation had cleared the crystal chamber faster than a fire alarm at a tax audit. Within minutes, Kai found himself alone with Queen Lyraleigh and a quantum security field that hummed ominously around the throne room's perimeter. The other advisors had retreated to what Archivist 7 diplomatically called emergency consultations, though Kai suspected it was more like panicked screaming behind closed doors. "So," Kai said, settling into an ornate chair. "Ah, the eternal optimists." Kai activated his workstation, trying to focus on familiar routines while his mind processed the impossible situation. "Well, while they're deciding whether to crown me or execute me, I might as well show you what else I found in those archives. Fair warning, it's not going to improve anyone's mood." The holographic displays materialized between them, casting eerie shadows on the crystal walls. But these weren't the financial discrepancies Kai had presented to the council. These were the records that had required his newly elevated security clearance to access, the ones buried so deep in quantum encryption that only the debt bond had unlocked them. "Remember those mysteriously disappearing weapons I mentioned? Well, it gets worse, much worse." Kai gestured to a complex web of data connections. "Meet the Meridian Trading Syndicate. On paper, they're a perfectly legitimate military contractor. Stellar reputation, government contracts spanning 3 star systems, and a corporate motto about building tomorrow's peace today. Very inspiring stuff. But," Queen Lyraleigh leaned forward, her violet eyes reflecting the holographic light, "but their idea of peace apparently involves a lot of strategically timed military disasters." Kai highlighted a series of communication logs. "These are encrypted transmissions between Meridian executives and someone codenamed Architect. 3 days before the siege of Korath, Architect received detailed defensive positions for your forces, including shield generator specifications and rotation schedules. The Queen's face hardened. You're certain of this? As certain as death, taxes, and the fact that airline food will never taste good. Kai pulled up another data stream. Here's where it gets really creative. Meridian didn't just sell faulty equipment to your people, they sold the antidotes to your enemies. Your shield generators were programmed with hidden vulnerabilities, but only Meridian knew the specific frequencies needed to exploit them. They turned our own defenses against us. Like a bad magic trick, except instead of making rabbits disappear, they made entire battalions vanish in clouds of superheated plasma. Kai rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of sleepless nights and terrible discoveries. The architect coordinated it all. Supply drops that arrived just in time to be captured, defensive positions that became death traps, evacuation routes that led straight into ambushes. Queen Lyrelay stood and began pacing, her movements sharp with controlled fury. How many died because of their manipulations? Conservative estimate. About 40,000 of your people, plus another 20,000 from the opposing forces who were just as manipulated as you were. Kai's voice grew quiet. The beautiful part from a corporate perspective is that higher casualties meant bigger reconstruction contracts. Meridian made a fortune rebuilding what they'd helped destroy. And my rescue. Kai hesitated, then activated another display. That's where things get personal. You weren't supposed to survive the bunker collapse. According to the architect's timeline, your death was supposed to trigger a massive retaliatory strike that would have escalated the entire conflict. Instead, you lived. The war ended 6 months later, and Meridian's profits dropped by 30%. Because you pulled me from the rubble. Because I happened to be in the wrong place at the right time, with a very stubborn refusal to let people die on my watch. Kai managed a weak smile. Turns out my pathological inability to mind my own business has occasionally saved the day. Who knew? The quantum security field around them pulsed, indicating an incoming communication. Archivist 7 voice echoed through the chamber with barely controlled urgency. Your Majesty, Mr. Tremaine, I apologize for the interruption, but the Trade Summit delegation has moved up their final vote. The Human Consortium representatives are demanding an immediate decision on the embargo extension. Kai and Queen Lyrelay exchanged glances. The timing couldn't be coincidental. How immediate? The Queen asked. 6 hours, Your Majesty. They claim urgent scheduling conflicts require accelerated proceedings. Urgent scheduling conflicts. Kai snorted, more like urgent damage control. Someone knows we're digging into their dirty laundry, and they want to slam the door shut before we can air it publicly. Queen Lyrelay returned to her throne, royal authority settling around her like armor. Archivist 7. What are the legal implications of the debt bond activation? Complex, Your Majesty. Mr. Tremaine now holds equivalent standing to a royal consort in matters of planetary governance. His testimony carries the same legal weight as yours, and any formal accusations he makes must be investigated by neutral arbiters. Which means, Kai said slowly, if I stand up in that summit and start talking about corporate conspiracy and war profiteering, they can't just dismiss me as some crazy human with delusions of grandeur. Precisely. However, the servobot's tone carried a warning. Making such accusations without absolute proof could be construed as an act of war by the Human Consortium. The political ramifications would be significant. Kai looked at the holographic evidence floating around them, damning, comprehensive, and entirely circumstantial. Define absolute proof in this context, because I've got smoking guns, but they're all digital smoking guns that could theoretically be fabricated. Physical evidence, corroborating witnesses, or confession by the perpetrators, Queen Lyrelay said grimly, none of which we're likely to obtain in the next 6 hours. Actually, Kai said, a dangerous idea forming in his mind. There might be one option. It's completely insane, probably illegal, and will definitely get us both killed if it goes wrong. Those are my favorite kinds of plans, the Queen replied with a smile that held no humor whatsoever. The debt bond gives me legal standing, right? I can make formal demands under royal protocol. Within reason, yes. Then I formally demand a truth-telling ceremony. Ancient law, older than the current political treaties. Even the human consortium can't refuse without looking like they're hiding something. And once we're in the ceremonial circle, neural inhibitors prevent deception. Queen Lyreley stared at him. You want to challenge the most powerful trading consortium in human space to a ritual combat of honesty. I want to make them choose between confessing their crimes and looking like cowards in front of the entire galactic community. Kai grinned, feeling the familiar rush that came with committing to a completely reckless course of action. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? They could only kill us once. Mr. Tremaine, Archivist 7, interjected with mechanical concern. Your optimism subroutines may be malfunctioning. Nah, those are working fine. It's my self-preservation instincts that are clearly broken. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with the kind of tension usually reserved for bomb disposal and tax negotiations. Representatives from 47 worlds filled the crystalline amphitheater, their conversations creating a multilingual hum that Kai's universal translator struggled to parse. At the center of it all, the ancient truth circle glowed with quantum resonance fields that would make deception literally impossible. Well, Kai muttered to Queen Lyreley as they approached their designated positions, I've always wondered what it would feel like to have my brain turned inside out by alien technology. Today I get to find out. The neural inhibitors only prevent conscious deception, she replied, though her voice carried a note of concern. Unfortunately, they can't prevent unconscious stupidity. Lucky for me, I've built my entire career on conscious stupidity. Much more reliable. Kai adjusted his formal robes. The palace staff had somehow found ceremonial garments that fit him, though he suspected they'd been designed for someone with better posture and less tendency to fidget. Across the circle, the human consortium delegation arranged themselves with military precision. Admiral Sarah Knox, their chief negotiator, wore the kind of smile that could freeze helium. Beside her stood 3 corporate representatives whose expressions suggested they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy, including the inside of a black hole. Before we begin, Admiral Knox announced to the assembly, I must formally protest this irregular proceeding. The human consortium questions the legitimacy of demands made under unusual circumstances. The debt bond is recognized under Galactic Arbitration Code, Section 47, Queen Lyreley replied smoothly. Unless the Admiral wishes to challenge law that predate human spaceflight by several millennia. Knox's smile grew sharper. Of course not, Your Majesty. We simply find it curious that an archivist, however elevated his current status, would resort to such dramatic measures to present routine financial discrepancies. Routine. Kai stepped forward, feeling the truth circle's energy field tingle against his skin. Admiral, when 40,000 people die because someone's playing 3-card Monte with weapons shipments, I'd call that slightly more than routine. But hey, maybe military standards have changed since my day. The quantum resonance field activated with a sound like cosmic wind chimes. Suddenly, Kai could feel the weight of absolute honesty pressing against his consciousness. Not unpleasant, but impossible to ignore. Mr. Tremaine, Knox said, her voice carefully neutral, please present your evidence to the assembly. The holographic displays materialized above the truth circle, casting ethereal light across the gathered delegates. But these weren't the charts and graphs from Kai's earlier presentations. The neural inhibitors had unlocked something deeper, memories and connections his conscious mind had missed. The Meridian Trading Syndicate, Kai began, his voice carrying newfound authority, engineered the worst atrocities of the Korath campaign for profit. But they didn't work alone. He gestured, and new data streams appeared. Communication logs, financial transfers, authorization codes that painted a web of corruption reaching into the highest levels of human government. Admiral Knox personally signed the deployment orders that put me in position to witness Queen Lyrale's rescue. Not because she cared about medical support, but because someone needed to be blamed when the operation went sideways. Kai felt the truth resonate through the circle, impossible to deny or distort. I was supposed to die in that bunker collapse, along with Her Majesty, a tragic loss that would have justified the massive retaliation strike Meridian needed to maximize their reconstruction contracts. Knox's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. These are serious accusations based on circumstantial evidence. Then let's get specific. Kai pulled up a financial record that made several delegates gasp. Admiral, would you care to explain the 7 million credit transfer from Meridian Industries to your personal account, dated 3 days after the siege? The truth circle's resonance field pulsed, compelling honesty from everyone within its influence. Knox tried to speak, failed, tried again. Consulting fees, she said finally, the words torn from her throat, for post-war strategic analysis. Consulting fees, Kai repeated. Or payment for services rendered during active combat operations. Knox's face flushed red. The operations were necessary to bring the conflict to a swift conclusion, by ensuring maximum casualties on both sides, by demonstrating the futility of continued resistance. The words exploded from Knox before she could stop them. Meridian's projections showed that a prolonged war would cost millions of lives. Better to concentrate the casualties and end it quickly. The assembly erupted in outraged voices from a dozen species. Queen Lyrale raised her hand for silence, her violet eyes never leaving Knox's face. And the faulty equipment. The compromised defensive positions. Knox's shoulders sagged in defeat. Standard practice. Create demand by ensuring supply shortfalls. It's basic economics. Basic economics, Kai said, his voice carrying dangerous quiet, that turned living beings into profit margins. Mr. Tremaine, one of the corporate representatives stepped forward, a thin man whose expensive suit couldn't hide his obvious panic. Perhaps we could discuss a settlement. Meridian Industries is prepared to offer substantial reparations for any misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. Queen Lyrale's voice could have frozen Starfear. You orchestrated genocide for quarterly profits and you call it a misunderstanding. We call it business, the executive replied with desperate honesty. Nothing personal, just market dynamics. The truth circle pulsed again, and Kai felt something shift in his understanding. The conspiracy wasn't driven by malice. It was driven by the absolute indifference of systems that valued efficiency over life. You know what the really terrifying part is? Kai addressed the entire assembly now. They're not monsters. They're just people who convince themselves that spreadsheets matter more than souls. And that might be worse than monsters, because at least monsters know they're doing evil. Admiral Knox straightened, some of her military bearing returning despite the circumstances. Mr. Tremaine, what do you propose we do? The trade's lanes are already established. Billions of people depend on Meridian's infrastructure. We fix it, Kai said simply. Same way you fix any broken system. You acknowledge the problem, accept responsibility, and do better. He turned to Queen Lyrale. Your Majesty, I formally request that the debt bond be extended to include corporate reparations and oversight reforms. And I formally accept that request, she replied without hesitation. Let it be recorded that Meridian Industries will compensate all affected worlds, submit to permanent oversight, and transfer 40% of their assets to an independent reconstruction fund. You can't do this, the corporate executive protested. The economic ramifications. The economic ramifications, Kai interrupted, are considerably less severe than the alternative, which involves several very angry alien governments declaring war on human space. Trust me, that's much worse for quarterly profits. Knox looked around the assembly. seeing the faces of representatives whose worlds had suffered under Meridian's manipulations. "The human consortium will comply with the tribunal's decision," she said finally. "We ask only for a reasonable timeline to implement the required changes." 1 standard year, Queen Lyreley declared, monitored by joint oversight committees from all affected worlds. As the formal proceedings concluded and delegates began filing out of the assembly hall, Kai found himself alone with the Queen in the gradually dimming truth circle. "So," he said, exhaustion finally catching up with him, "I guess this means I can't go back to quiet archival work and synthesized coffee." "The debt bond doesn't require you to stay," Queen Lyreley replied gently. "You've more than fulfilled any obligation." "Maybe, but someone needs to keep an eye on those oversight committees, make sure they actually do their jobs." Kai managed a tired smile. "Besides, I've gotten used to alien food and royal company. Going back to Earth bureaucracy might kill me." "And the other reason?" Kai looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not just the alien queen or the scarred survivor, but the person who had trusted him to do the right thing even when it might have destroyed everything she'd worked for. "The other reason," he said quietly, "is that for the first time in my life I found work that actually matters, and maybe someone who makes it worth doing." Queen Lyreley stepped closer, her violet eyes reflecting the last traces of the truth circle's glow. "The debt bond is supposed to be temporary, you know, a formal obligation, nothing more. Good thing we're both terrible at following formal obligations." As they left the Grand Assembly Hall together, Kai realized that somewhere between hunting for missing widgets and preventing galactic war, he'd stopped being a man who counted other people's money and started being someone who counted on other people to do better. It wasn't the career change he'd planned, but it was the one he'd needed. Behind them, Archivist 7 floated silently through the empty hall, updating records and filing reports. In the servobot's databanks, a simple notation appeared. Human Archivist Kai Tremaine, status updated from temporary contractor to permanent pain in the bureaucratic posterior. Recommend increased coffee rations and regular diplomatic immunity renewals. Even artificial intelligence, it seemed, could recognize when someone had found their calling.